Today I want to share with you a new kitchen tool for the traditional foods cook, the Flake Lovers Flaker from Mockmill. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning how to be a modern pioneer in the kitchen, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now before we jump into the unboxing, I just want to mention that I will put timestamps in the description underneath this video, as well as the pinned comment. So if you want to jump ahead at any point, just check those timestamps and it'll be easy to do. Well, I think those of you who have been with me for a while know how much I enjoy using my Mockmill grain mill. And when I saw that they had come out with a new item, I couldn't wait to give it a try. Now, what's in this box is what Mockmill calls the Flake Lovers Flaker, and it's made by Wolfgang Mock. And with this flaker, apparently you can take a whole grain and turn it into a flake. So for example, you can take your whole oat groats, which are great for storing in your extended or your prepper pantry, because that has a very nice long shelf life when it's in the whole grain form. So you can take that whole oat groat and you can run it through this machine and make flaked oats, what looks like old-fashioned rolled oats. Now before we unbox this and give it a try, we'll actually make some flakes. I just want to mention that I know so many of you have shared with me that you also love using your Mockmill grain mill, but that some of you have found that when you went to order it, that Mockmill was out of stock. And for their grain mills, they said that hopefully they had been planning on having them back in stock by May, but now that's been moved to June. So be sure to be checking on their site for when the Mockmill grain mill comes back in stock, and I will also post any updates that I hear of on the community page at the homepage of my YouTube channel. And if you get ready to order your Mockmill grain mill, be sure to check the link in the description underneath this video that'll take you over to my website where I have a 5% off discount code for ordering your Mockmill. So that'll give you a nice little savings. And I also have an unboxing video that I did when I bought my Mockmill a number of years ago. And I'll be sure to link to that in the description below as well, so that if you're new to the Mockmill grain mill, you can watch me unbox it and watch me test it and see how it grinds grain and so on and so forth. Well, let's go ahead and unbox this flaker and give it a try. We'll see how it works. They do include a recipe, which is very cute, for Wolfgang Mock's muesli, and I think that you'll really enjoy looking through that. It's sort of a variation on the famous muesli known as Bircher muesli, and if that's something you'd like to see me make, the version that I make, be sure to leave that in the comments below, and I'll definitely add that to my list, and I'll make a video showing how I like to make Bircher muesli. Now I want to mention that this box came packed in a much larger box with good padding all around, so it's definitely shipped very well. I have no complaints. I also want to mention that this is not a sponsored post and that I bought this flaker myself, so I'm going to give you a very thorough and honest review. Now the first thing I want to take out of this box is the user's manual. And the good news about this flaker is that this is an electric flaker. So if you have one of the manual flakers that maybe you've bought over the years, maybe from places like Lehman's and all those lovely country stores that will sell the hand crank flakers, that's wonderful, and that's great to have when there are power outages or you just want to save power and use your own power for exercise. But the nice thing is that this is an electric flaker. So this can definitely make the task of flaking whole grain a little easier, and then you can have your manual flaker as your backup. Now before we go over a few things in the user manual, I just want to mention that this has quite a good price point for a flaker. This cost me $210. And I paid the full $210. I don't use my own discount code that I share with all of you. And the nice thing about this is that this flaker was shipped with free shipping. Now in this user manual, you have a little note in the beginning from Wolfgang Mach, and then basically there's just short instructions on how to use the flaker and a little note about spices, which we'll talk about in a bit. But for a full list of everything you can and can't flake, you will want to look at their website, and I'll be sure to put a link to the flaker page that lists a lot of wonderful information about the flaker. But for the most part, you can flake whole grains like oat groats, you could flake einkorn, you could flake rye, you could flake wheat berries, you could flake spelt berries. So you have a lot of options on what you can turn into flakes. And why would you want to do that? Yes, with oats it seems pretty common sense, because then you can use that to make muesli, you can use it to make oatmeal, you can do a lot of different things with it. But you can also do those things with other whole grains that you've flaked. You can cook with einkorn flakes and rye flakes and spelt flakes and so on and so forth, just like you would oat flakes. You can use them in baking, you can make mueslis with them, you can make oatmeal type cereals with them, and they're all very nutritious, and they all bring different nutrients to the table, so to speak. So by employing this machine and being able to flake your whole grain, you can introduce a lot of different nutrients into your diet, into your mueslis, into your hot cooked cereals, into your baking, so on and so forth, without having to just rely on old-fashioned rolled oats. Now, the nice thing about flaking whole grain at home, whether you're using a manual flaker or an electric flaker, is that the process is different than what's done in the factory. On the Mockmill site, they go into a lot more detail about this, but basically the bottom line is that when you flake whole grains, all you're doing is flaking them. You're just pressing them basically in a fashion with your manual flaker or your electric flaker to create a flake. But in the factory, when they go to flake primarily oat groats, yes, you can buy flaked spelt and flaked rye, and I think I've shown you those in previous videos. But when oat groats are flaked in the factory, they're treated in a different way than they would be just in a manual or electric flaker in your own home kitchen. They're usually heated and maybe boiled, and there's a whole big process that they go through. And what happens is, when you buy old-fashioned rolled oats that have been flaked in the oat groats have been flaked in the factory, they are actually less nutritious than the oat groats you flake at home, and in some cases significantly different in nutrition. And they're also lower in enzymes, which help you digest these various flaked grains, because it's the enzymes that begin to become destroyed when they have to be heated in the factory. But at home, you're not heating anything. And as I said, the Mockmill site goes into a lot of detail about all of this, and I will be sure to link to that page so that you can read more. But just know that flaking your own whole grain at home is creating a much more nutritious product than what you can buy in the store. Now, in addition to flaking whole grain, in this manual, this user's manual, it says that you can also flake spices. So if you do decide to flake spices, they do give a wonderful tip here. And it says that after you flake your spices, be sure to put in just a small amount of grain and then flake that, to clean the stainless steel rollers from residue. If you don't, your next batch of flakes may taste seasoned. So that's a good tip. Alrighty, the first thing I'm going to do is just take off the top and put this on the side, so it'll give me a little easier to grip and get this out of the box. Now, when you get the flaker out of the box, it's sitting in another piece of cardboard, just like the piece that was on the top, giving it protection. So it's very well packed. So we'll just lift it out of this part now. It also comes with the cord, And then in the back here is where you plug the cord in, and here's the on and off button. And right in the front, it's got its little label, Flake Lover, and it's very streamlined. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the housing that it's made out of. I think you're going to find this very interesting. I brought my iPad over here because I want to read to you what this housing is made of. It's just fascinating. And I wanted to read it off of their website because I don't want to make any mistakes. But it says that the housing is made from 100% renewable raw materials. The flaker housing is made from the same renewable ArboBlend material used for the Mockmill 100, what I've got, and the 200 grain mill housings. ArboBlend is a high-impact thermoplastic made of lignins from plant fiber that can be cast into a mold just as easily as plastic. Lignin is a waste product in the paper industry. This means that large quantities can be produced inexpensively and sustainably. It also has a significantly higher quality than plastic in terms of its visual and haptic appeal. H-A-P-T-I-C appeal. That's a new word for me. Well, the word haptic means relating to the sense of touch. And I really believe that. It does, just like with the Mockmill 100. This feels very nice to touch. It just feels better than plastic. And I love the fact that it's sustainably made, that they're basically using what would otherwise be a waste product to create something so wonderful as this flaker as well as the Mockmill grain mill. Now basically what you do is remove the top. Just this one little piece comes out very easily. And then what you're going to look down at, and I'll take pictures and overlay close-up pictures of all of this, what you're looking down into is where you're going to put your grain, your whole grain. Now the first thing that the user manual recommends is that we run a little whole grain through here and flake it, and then discard that, because that little bit will clean out the flaker if any dust has accumulated in there. And now the user manual also recommends don't put your hands in here. You'll see in the up-close picture, there's the little stainless steel flakers, I guess is what you would call them, stainless steel flakers. You never want to put your hand in there or a knife or anything like that, because you would injure your hand and damage any utensil that you would put in there. Now, something I want to mention about having a flaker, whether it's a manual flaker or an electrical flaker, is that this really gives us options regarding something that you've probably heard me mention before, and it's a term that I use called multiple streams of food. And what I mean by multiple streams of food is that we can certainly buy old-fashioned rolled oats, and we can buy flaked spelt, and we can buy flaked rye. I'm not sure I've ever seen flaked einkorn, but there are a number of flaked whole grains that we can buy and keep in our working pantries and also keep in our extended or prepper pantries. But how nice it is to be able to store whole grain with its very long extended shelf life and then be able to make our own old-fashioned rolled oats or other flaked grains. So we basically have two streams of creating some type of flaked grain. It's the same way with home canned goods and store-bought canned goods. You may be a home canner, but it's always good to have some backup store-bought canned goods. So that's what I mean by multiple streams of food. And the more multiple streams we can have, all the better. Now what I've got here are whole oat groats. They're not flaked, they're not steel cut, they're not old-fashioned rolled oats, nothing like that. They're the actual whole oat groat. I like buying these because they have a very long shelf life, and then I use these to make old-fashioned oatmeal. It's very easy to do, and it's the tastiest oatmeal you'll ever have. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, I'll be sure to link to the video I have where I show you how to make old-fashioned oatmeal using oat groats. Well, the user's manual tells us that when we are using the flaker for the first time, that we want to go ahead and run 2 tablespoons of whatever whole grain we're flaking through the flaker so that we clean out any dust that's in it. Well, I've got 1 tablespoon of the oat groats in the hopper. Now I'm going to go ahead and add another tablespoon. Then I'll go ahead and I'll put my lid on. And we'll turn this on and we'll see how it does. Well, this is terrific. I have to say I'm really impressed. This makes beautiful flaked oats, or almost identical to what I would see if I opened a box of old-fashioned rolled oats. So this is perfect now for making some muesli, or making oatmeal cookies, or making oatmeal, whatever we wanted to do, or making an oatmeal bread with it. This would be wonderful. Now, often if you buy old-fashioned rolled oats at the grocery store, it might have a best by date about a year or maybe 2 years out from the time that you buy it. However, with this type of homemade flaked oat, I don't specifically know what the shelf life would be. However, it would be my intention, since this is so easy to use, to simply flake them whenever I needed them and then use them right away. And instead just always be storing my oat groats, which have a very long shelf life. It really varies on the different sources that you look to. Some people will consider whole grains like a forever food. Granted, it must decrease a little bit in nutrition over time, but many will say 8 to 10 years for oat groats. For some of your other wheats, like your wheat berries and your einkorn berries, your spelt berries, rye berries, often you'll see that they can be stored when stored properly. And I have a video where I talk in detail all about storing grains properly, and I'll be sure to link to that for you. But some people say they can last 25 years and maybe even longer. So you can see why it's really important to have whole grain that you store and then can either grind in a grain mill, whether an electric grain mill or a manual grain mill, or flake in the case of using a flaker. Well, I measured out a cup of oat groats, and I've gone ahead and poured some into the hopper. And it seems like I've got about a third or maybe a quarter of a cup left in here. So maybe it comfortably holds about 3/4 of a cup. Okay, here we go. Well, that probably just took about 1 minute and 40 seconds, and it's relatively quiet. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to sound on the video, but in person it's really quite quiet, so I'm impressed with that. And now let's see how much flaked oats we got from, I'm going to measure that out so I know exactly, but I'm thinking maybe I was able to get about 3/4 of a cup of the oat groats into the hopper. Well, this is definitely a substantial 1 cup of flaked oat groats. It's definitely a little rounder. I had to pack it down to get everything in there that I had in the bowl. So that's nice. Well, I measured my oat groats, and I actually had 1/3 of a cup. So that means that what I was able to fit into the hopper was 2/3 cup of the oat groats. And 2/3 cup of the oat groats created one very well packed 1 cup of flaked oats. Well, I'm definitely going to use this to make some Bircher muesli. I think it's going to be so nutritious. And if you'd like me to show you how to make the Bircher muesli in a video, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn more about what I think are some of the best cook's tools for the traditional foods kitchen, be sure to click on this video where I go over a whole host of things, what I consider the essentials and what I consider kind of the little extra special things. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.